at that.
We're already here. Hello.
Woo! Look at that.
Woo! The power of rainbows.
Perfect for national
33%
company.
gayer.
Woo! Oh, so beautiful. Oh my goodness. Well, what a joyful time to be here, Grand Arbiter.
Every day is a pleasure and a magical moment, is really what it is.
So magical.
Life is filled with disappointments, frustrations, sorrows, and sometimes you just gotta let it wash over you like a real astringent green tea. You don't really want it to be here and be that astringent, but technically it's good for you.
What a beautiful analogy, Grand Arbiter. And good evening. Hello. Welcome to tea. 'Tis I, Madame Askew. And we are here with our very special, wonderful guest, David R. Slayton, who's an absolute pip and so patient. Hello, David.
Hello.
So good to be here with you. Good evening. Happy Friday.
Good evening. I hope I made it to the right time and place. So.
You did. Although with us, it's always tricky.
I mean, at the very least, you look pleasant. You genuinely look like you ate something today, and you look mildly hydrated. So we're doing our best here, and you're looking fantastic.
Oh, my friend Sally's here. Hi, Sally.
Hello, Sally. Hello, everyone. Hello, Lady June Squill. Hello, Sarah. That's Mathematica for those in the know. It's so wonderful to be here. David, this sort of came about a bit because you have a new book on the horizon coming out in just a few days. Rogue Community College.
It's the giant banner.
So exciting. So exciting. I have an early copy.
I mean, you are selected and blessed, chosen among all. Really? So this is my David. Gentleman to gentleman. I have a real problem. My co-partner in crime continues to go around stealing the hearts of authors everywhere and just keeping them for extended periods. I'm not sure what to do about it, but I feel like you should be warned.
You know, I put the hearts in a really nice gilded box and I dust them daily. They're in very good shape. So also, isn't that on brand for gingers? So
Dolores here has her own little box of hearts. So you're doing just.
So. Hey, Dolores. Hey, girl. Hey. Well, dear Sarah has already pre-ordered your book, which, you know, Sarah, you understood the assignment. Always pre-order when you can, and is waiting for her copy to get to her. That's so delightful. Such a good book. David, it's so good. It's so good.
I think you just like the dinosaurs.
I mean, I do like the dinosaurs. You're not wrong.
She does say this about every book, but I know the secret truths, the hidden truths. I know all of Madame Askew's dirty literary secrets. I know the books she secretly doesn't like. And your book is not one of them.
That's true. We don't talk about the books I don't like. We just don't talk about them. They never see the light of day again.
The knowledge will never be known. It will be hidden. It is the unspoken rules. But then I spoke them into being. Oh, no.
From the box of hearts.
David, I'm a known non-reader. Everyone knows I'm dumb as a box of rocks, and the written word is an arcane, confounding text that tortures me to no end. Why should I become more literate to read your book? What are some of the key things that you think really sell me on cracking through my idiotic idolatry?
Well, first of all, they're really good on audio. And my publisher is Blackstone. And if you like audiobooks, or if audiobooks work better for you, then absolutely consider audiobook. My narrator is Michael David Axtell. He's an award-winning Shakespearean actor. And he just narrated Chuck Palahniuk's book that came out this week, his newest. So I might lose him. He might get too famous and too big for me. And my friend Shiri is here and we just want you to understand hot elves is one reason, right? hot
Good
elves.
reason. Good reason.
Excellent.
And Lady June Squill has already pre-ordered the ebook, so you've got some like people who are ready for this. Not the Grand Arbiter. He's going to get there, perhaps. Ah, no.
no.
Oh no, you don't like hot elves.
Lost
mean, I think there's probably more things. I hear there's dinosaurs.
well, Rogue Community College is dinosaurs. So what I write books that are about gay characters that are not about being gay. So I don't write coming out. I do write family trauma. The Adam Binder series that starts with White Trash Warlock does have that, but I don't write romance. So while there's always a love story, you should know they're magical mysteries. That's really what I write. Hey, Mira, how are you?
Well, and I would argue from as a dumb box of rocks that sometimes has philosophical concepts underneath. They're like the rocks that your mother would get that like say peace and love on them. Mine have like philosophical musings on them. I would say it is impossible to write a story about a gay person that isn't about them being gay. That's just not a thing that can happen because the nature of being gay is a unique experience. And I think that like is an inescapable component, but that it doesn't become the central fold of the narrative.
No, I think, yeah, that's a really good way to put it. So that's a deeper way to kind of tease out that point. You're right. I don't want to erase that part of my identity, and I don't want those characters to have.
You couldn't if you wanted to. It's not possible. Like it's not possible, given the context of a character, to make them not gay is to erase something about them. And you're right.
But I don't want it to be the center of the story, right? And better authors than me have covered coming out, and I also like to write queer joy when I can. So, but it was very interesting. My last book was Dark Moon, Shallow Sea. It's an epic fantasy, and it was such an interesting experiment to write in a queer normative world where nobody cared. And again, while there are definitely male-male relationships happening inside of it, it has such a different. They would never think to call themselves gay because their world just doesn't have that label, and that they don't need it. So it was a really nice place to play, to work in that completely different mindset.
But
go ahead.
Thank you, Grand Arbiter. I loved that book so much, David. It's such a beautiful read, so lush. Your world building is so fantastic. And these days, I think you could put a little romantasy tag on it if you wish to, even though it's not a romantic situation as the central portion of the story. You do have a little bit of that thread there, and I love that there's no angst about whether or not they should be allowed to be together because they're two men. The tension is around other things entirely, and it made for a really wonderful read. As you say, the way you handled that queer normative experience was very validating and very satisfying as a reader. Also, highly recommend the book if you're looking for something, like high fantasy kind of experience, but not elves. No sword and sorcery.
Let me rephrase my original question to make sure that we get to what I was trying to do. Give me the elevator pitch for Rogue Community College.
Oh, okay.
Oh.
Well, it's right there on the poster because I wrote it for once and they actually used it this time. So, chosen ones go to elite schools of magic. This one is for everybody else. I love books with magical schools. I think they're such a fun thing in fiction, but they're always for the chosen ones. They're always for the elite. There always is this component of them being extra special. And as a high school dropout and somebody who comes from rural Oklahoma, I started out in community college. My own journey to education was not, the normal experience. I started out at community college, moved on to state school, ended up with 3 degrees. So I like to say I'm the world's most overeducated high school dropout. But that's really what it comes down to is I wanted to create a found family heroine's journey, a situation for these characters who who wouldn't fit in anywhere else. It's Umbrella Academy meets Doctor Who.
I love that. That's a wonderful way of putting it. And another vote for Dark Moon, Shallow Sea. Yeah, it's so good. Having made a significant way through the book, I haven't finished it yet, although I'm trying really hard because I'm eager to get to the end. I love that way of describing it because it is the sort of magic school that I'd want to go to, honestly. The friend group is so, like made up of all of these sort of odd characters who had a little bit trouble in other settings, having the friends and connections they needed. I'm like, oh, I see myself in that. It's lovely.
Is it also a rainbow coalition? That's the nickname that Pathfinder players give the characters, where it's every character has their own. They're using a different ancestry for every single character. So, you've got like
it's very diverse,
and a bird person and a bat person.
It's absolutely a rainbow coalition. Each student has a different background, has a different power set, and each of them, their powers are problematic in a different way to them. And that's why they don't fit in. It also is my most diverse book. I mean, I always have characters of color. I always have a diverse set. But I think RCC is likely my most diverse so far. Most of the characters are human or are kind of a human variant, half something. We have a couple of exceptions, like the librarian Jack, who's a technopath, who is trans and is made of circuit boards and wires. And then we have Vran, the sea elf, who's a crossover character from the Adam Binder series. So there are a few elves in RCC too. Is the school actively trying to kill the students? Bill wants to know. The opposite. The school is it's kind of the opposite. So Isaac Frost is the main character. He's sent to the school undercover to try to destroy it by an organization that doesn't want it to succeed. And then he immediately realized the problem is he's an assassin, but the school is alive. And how do you kill a building? So it's the flip of that. The school's not trying to kill them. He's trying to kill it. And the school is messing with him the whole time.
And it's delightful. And also, I don't want to give too much away because the book has
nothing away
come out yet. But I like that the school not only messes with him, but is a little bit parenting him too.
And the school's cheeky, like it has a sense of humor. So it has a funny way of it always gets you where you need to go, but it's mischievous about it.
Anthropomorphic architecture is one of my favorite tropes, so I'm down.
It's wonderful. Yeah. Honestly, Alicia, my high school building was trying to kill all of the students inside. So I relate to that experience. Not like Scholomance, but, still. So, David, you've got the book coming out. It's coming out on the 15th. So people can potentially go to a bookstore and they might see it early on the shelves. You know?
Oh yeah, a couple of readers sent me emails today of pictures, and it's on some stores are already putting it out. But either way, it's out on Tuesday officially, just in case they are following that rule.
You can still pre-order at all the book places, and I'm a big fan of bookstore.org because it gives back to independent bookstores. But, if you can shop at your local independent bookstore, that is always good. But really, buying or checking out the book is the idea. So library is also a great place. Get on your library waiting list. I'm hoping that the book is, on all the libraries, that there's a really long waiting list because people are so eager to read it. But it's highly recommended. A wonderful read. And thank you for sending me the PR box. The treasures were so wonderful, but also it's just getting my hands on the book is always like the best. This is
your third.
Sorry, go ahead, please.
No, it's your book.
If you need to beat somebody with something, the book is good for that too. And not to be too forward, but she looks lovely naked. If you haven't taken the jacket off.
Let's just slip that cover on.
Da 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 da.
So one of my favorite things, since we're talking about the art, about the Rogue Community College logo on everything, is that there is a little dinosaur right on the seal, and that's so good. It's so good, David. It's beautiful, beautiful cover. Whoever did your cover design and the book layout and everything did just a marvelous job. It's stunning.
It's Sarah Riedlinger from Blackstone. She also did Deadbeat Druid and Dark Moon Shallow Sea, which also the hardback of that is gorgeous, has a black leather blue effect. But Sarah does an incredible job, and she's so creative. And one of the things I really love about her is that she does take input, but it's more collaborative than other authors sometimes get. So I just love her to death. She does an incredible job.
I love that. And yeah, no. Yes, it is a thing tonight. Book stripping. It's like burlesque for readers. So I have to admit,
Change your Dewey decibels.
I have Dark Moon Shallow Sea in 2 form. I honestly, I have most of your books in audiobook, digital, and physical book because I guess I'm obsessive. But I did not get the Dark Moon Shallow Sea book as a hardback, and I'm so sad that I did not, because you're right, it's a gorgeous hardback, and the paperback is beautiful, but gosh, the color scheme and everything, if you get an opportunity, pick that up as a hardback. It's so gorgeous.
I'll see if I certainly have a few hiding around here. I'll find one for you.
Wow. Thank you. I wasn't trying to hint, but I will always take precedence. So anyway, we're just, Friday nights are always all over the place, but we are so happy to have you here and to talk about your book. And just a reminder that you do not have to read the previous books to enjoy the new book, but I highly recommend reading those previous books because Adam and the characters in the Adam Binder series are fantastic. I love Adam. He's such a mess and he's so wonderful. And I know that we would have been chums and I would have been like, Adam, let's first of all, come have sleepovers. We'll do homework together. I'll hide you in my closet when your parents are trying to send you to bad places, and I'll make you raviolis.
Okay. So with this deep confession of Madame Askew's deep desire to put gay people in closets.
Just to hide them from bad people. Come on now. I know it's National Coming Out Day, but sometimes you have to hide. For safety.
To change the tone just a little bit. So that's coming out this week. Madame Askew, you have class on Sunday.
Yes.
But also book club is coming out.
Well, book club is coming up, but more important, more pressing, tomorrow morning I have my Sip the Tea with Leanna Renee Heber. So if you like cheeky, ridiculous conversations with authors, I scheduled 2 this weekend. We get like the extra special surprise gift of David tonight, and tomorrow we get Leanna. And so you've got dinosaurs and gay men and magic tonight, and tomorrow it's gothy goodness. So you should definitely come. That's at 10 a.m. Pacific time, and it will live stream all the places you are seeing this right now. So, yeah.
Okay. Anything else to announce, everybody? Not to be the one driving the car, but someone has to.
I feel like the car might be driving us tonight, but no, I think that is everything on my end.
Okay. From that, we move into Patreon's Corner. Today's Patreon's Corner's topic was as voted on by our Patreon members, which if you aren't a member yet, be one now. The longing is deep, and it can only be filled with more patrons. Today's topic is going to be occult geography. Ma'am Maskew and I sat together talking about what we wanted to talk about with David, and we decided everything that we had to talk about one magical thing. Not sure what we were, but we talked about 3 different things. The one that was voted on was we're going to be discussing the most popular forms of magic based on our assumptions about American states. So we're going to go from each American state that as the ones we feel moved towards. And we're going to...
Grand Arbiter, may I make a suggestion for our sanity and for time? Because I cannot remember all 50 states.
We're not going to go through all 50.
But let me... Well, how about regionally? We can look at the Southeast, the Southwest.
We can talk about regions, and then don't worry about it. We'll drive the car for the 35 minutes that we have, and then we'll just let it go. It's not a big deal. Everything's fine.
I've just, it's sometimes easier to generalize by region, although I certainly have opinions about what the magic system is in Arizona. It's fire.
Let's start there, because we should start where we are both deeply knowledgeable. And David, how much knowledge do you have of Arizona?
Not much. I've been to Tucson twice. That's it.
That is the magic of Arizona. We're going to be talking about sort of like mechanical or like practices of what we think the magic users of that region should specialize in based on our own personal thought processes. Now, I, as someone who's lived in Arizona for an extended period, crystals. There's a lot of rocks in Arizona. There's a lot of obsession with crystals.
The country's biggest rock and mineral show does take place in Arizona.
Correct. The Gem and Mineral Show, which is the go-to field trip for children in the Tucson area. Go there, look at things you cannot possibly purchase and possibly break something that's irreplaceable. Definitely a good place to put toddlers. But yeah, no, the magic of crystals is well known. Sedona really carries that crystal magic throughout it. It's hard to escape the power of healing crystals and putting things in the moonlight. That is my take. Please debate.
Well, if we're going by state, I'd say New Mexico is calling and would like to have a word with Arizona about.
I think that they can share crystals. I definitely think they can share crystals.
It goes back to your regional thing.
Yeah, I definitely think that the region of magic of. I just don't think California is anything like California, Nevada, Colorado. I don't think that sounds like crystals.
I think parts of California, the part that abuts to Arizona, if you get into like the Joshua Tree vibe and the Nevada desert,
that's totally crystal central. Yeah, the Southwest is like, can I have crystals?
Predictably, are crystals.
Could I have a crystal pyramid? That's really like very key. And we've got another vote. So yes, there's so many mines in Arizona and all throughout the Southwest.
Do you know why Arizona has so many minerals and so much weird mining?
Does it have to do with dinosaurs?
Kind of, not really, but kind of. Arizona was the center point of a volcanic field for a large portion of its geologic history, and so a magna field sort of goes through Arizona. And it's no longer active, but it basically has all of these crystallized and formed like odd things. That's why there's so much radioactive materials and other things that you normally don't find in the materials, because it's such a unique geological history.
Fun
facts.
That is fun facts. No, I don't really have any pushback too hard on crystals, although given the temperatures here, maybe Arizona needs to rethink the crystals and just embrace fire, since it feels like it's fire all the time here.
I think that it's like fire crystals, like crystals that are on fire.
You could also probably get somebody who's trying to manipulate weather magic to cool, to bring in as much cool as possible with all the heat. There
definitely is like a desperation. I don't know how successful the magic would be in that region. It does have the largest impact crater in North America as well. So there is a big giant hole in the ground where an asteroid smashes in. So there's that. So that's my take, though.
So, all right, crystals for the Southwest. I think from New Mexico across through Joshua Tree and into, you know, the southwestern part.
Like, if the second you start hitting LA, it's charisma magic. Like there's a little pocket of just like charms and glamours and illusion.
Oh, yeah. There's probably like several courts of the Fae out in LA who were just like doing the whole
deals
glamour.
Yeah. You are both from. This is something that you guys share.
What are you doing? I'm not from anywhere. I'm from the south of England. I don't know what you're talking about.
To this region.
That's true.
Hi to this region.
That's correct.
So, Okies, my darling Okies.
Oklahoma.
What is the magic of Oklahoma?
Well, having had very personal experience with it. So I grew up in the woods outside of Guthrie, and we had natural deposits of bog iron because at one point it used to be flooded. So the magic in Oklahoma is very kind of what you get in White Trash Warlock. It's very backwoods. It's a little bit creepy. It's kind of a almost animalistic spiritualism, a lot of sympathetic magic, and a lot what I would call kind of desperate magic. Like magic is like, please
pleading,
keep us from starving. Like,
well, there's a lot of starving in Oklahoma. One of the things that for those who don't have a bond with Oklahoma might not know is that the state flower is mistletoe, which, yes, is not a flower. It is a parasite because when the white settlers were flooding in to the state and unprepared for the weather and the conditions they were going to find, lots of people died in the winter, and the only thing they had to put on the graves was mistletoe. And that's why mistletoe is the state flower of Oklahoma. So this is, I think, a more argument in favor of David's description of the magic of the state. I also think, though, that many people who ended up in Oklahoma were driven there by desperation, because the Trail of Tears ends in the state of Oklahoma. So many of the indigenous people who were moved there on reservation lands were not necessarily from Oklahoma originally, that area. They were being dropped there by, the imperial movement to get them out of places that was seen as more valuable. So there's a lot of despair and desperation in Oklahoma. What a jolly place it is.
It's sort of the magic of getting blood from a stone, right?
And it's just creepy. We have places like, I put some of these places into the books. Dead Woman's Crossing in Weatherford, for example.
Isn't it the most haunted state in America?
I don't know about the most. I think that'd probably be on the East Coast, but it is pretty darn haunted. So
I need to look this up really fast.
One of the most haunted places in America, however, is Dominion House, which is in Guthrie. And I flipped it around and used it and called it Liberty House, which is literally the name of the series for Rogue Community College. So yeah, Oklahoma is pretty darn haunted.
It's very creepy. And also my recollection is that there's amongst the sort of folk traditions and the sort of popular experience and imagining, there's a real acceptance of this kind of creepy folk magic that is born of the earth, and a commingling of like Irish mythology and the indigenous mythology into this like very homegrown kind
of experience. Mixed with Christianity a lot too. So you have somebody who might include a Bible in their kind of pagan ritual or witchy ritual. So you do get these weird syncretic things, kind of a little bit like what happens with hoodoo and spirit, where lots of things get brought in.
as people from Arizona, we know all about that because that's what a lot of the like spiritual practices that come out of Mexico are similar in that way, where it's a lot of like folded in, layered spiritual practices.
Yeah, Santeria and that sort of thing.
Isn't colonialism fun?
It's so fun. We love it. And I think it's so charming that we're always able to find a way to talk about it.
I mean,
So-
it's hard to avoid. So here is my thought process. And I actually think this is a very interesting one and a weird one. I actually think the magic of Texas is guns. And I think that's really weird conceptually.
Oh, all right.
But hear me out.
All right, I'm listening. I'm listening.
So the gun in Texas is not just an object of violence, but is also a spiritual object. It represents big portions of what the community feels is a representation of their own freedom and also a representation of power and protection. So it's a very complicated object. You can't have an object. Yeah, no, like it's something about the form, like one of the things that I like about magic is concepts, and it's a thing that we'll definitely fold into a lot of our conversation in magical metaphysics whenever we have that panel, is that the shape of a thing tends to inform what its use is for, but also what power it holds in our society, in our culture, in our approach. And the nature of a gun and the cowboy as a vignette, not as it historically exists, but the concept of cowboy is so indicative to the Texas landscape that I believe that you could call upon that power if you were using magic.
Well, I'm interested to hear what David has to say, but I'm going to push back on you just a little bit. I think that you make a very good argument, Grand Arbiter, but I want to make an argument for the deep old magic of Texas, which is the tall tale and braggadocio. So I think that magic is hyperbole and words. Bigger is better in Texas, and they mean that verbally as well. So that's my argument. But that's like the old magic. Maybe the new magic is.
I think it's an interesting conflict, right? Because it's an interesting conflict because the narrative around the cowboy is in itself a tall tale. And you could make the argument that magic got loose and now is beyond the controls of its wielders, right? Because the spaghetti Western is no longer like within the confines of its own making anymore. It's now evolved beyond it and has become difficult to control and has become indicative of the American way of life.
I think you're both right. Have either of you read Terry Pratchett's Witches Abroad?
Yes.
Absolutely fantastic, wonderful, wonderful book. Hysterical. Anyone listening, if you haven't read Witches Abroad, it is my comfort read. It is my number one. Like, I'm having a bad day, I got to go read Witches Abroad. And the book is like one of my oldest friends. However, it's very, very funny, and it has a wonderful parody of Anne Rice. It has wonderful parody of all these things. But he gets into the concept of gods are created when they are empowered through belief and that reinforcement. So I think that you're both making a really good point, because whether it's the tall tale or the gun, it's the fact that that symbol is imbued with all that cultural myth and power that lends it that kind of magic.
And I love that. I think that that's sort of why I think that it's one of those things where it's like, I think, so this is sort of a weird take, but I think that this is one of the challenges that Texas has as a state, is that it's lost control of its own narrative. That no longer Texas doesn't get to tell its own story anymore as a state very effectively, because its story is so, its tall tale is so tall that it can be seen from around the world. It's
changing so much too. The thing about Texas, they've had such an influx of people, and because of the cheaper real estate and companies moving there, there's a great comment there. Texas has succumbed to its own myth. I was just there I have several friends in Texas, and it's very interesting to see how Texas is changing and how they're watching the culture of Texas change and kind of become more homogenized. But there is still that sort of Texas pride and that sort of Texas spirit of, whether it's true or not, about independence. So Sarah said that Witches Abroad is now on reserve at the library. I hope you enjoy it. Let me know what you think. It is literally one of my all-time favorite books.
And I know we are talking about magic systems and all of this, but I'm like, there's a conversation to be had. Because we need to talk about Terry Pratchett sometimes. Another time.
I have a signed copy of We Free Men that was gifted to me, and it is one of my most prized possessions. I have all the special Discworld hardbacks that they put out. He helped collaborate on the covers before he died, and in the other room, I have a beautiful Terry Pratchett shelf.
Oh, I love that so much.
Let's talk about Wisconsin now. And we all know what Wisconsin's magic is.
Drinking.
Cheese.
No,
it's drinking also. No, drinking also.
Have you ever seen that map of the counties of Wisconsin that are like the drinking per county? There's one section that doesn't have they did it in blue, and everything is this deep, dark navy except for this one place. And they said the reason that is not that color is because it's a lake. The amount of alcohol. And I have a friend from Wisconsin. I love her to death, but when we travel together, we got to the hotel one night. She opened up her suitcase and pulled out a bottle of wine. I'm like, are you kidding?
Although, here is my question is, I think that the big thing for me, though, is that the narrative they tell about themselves? And is that what has cultural and spiritual significance? Because there is something about the way that I don't know if you've been to Wisconsin, but our experience of it, which we've gone a few times, and both the times that we've gone, it's been specifically about the conversation is you don't leave without a curd. Like that is you cannot. Curds manifest in our presence every time we're there.
You know why that is, though? It's because we are obsessed with cheese, and we do cheese magic, and we ask for it, and people make it happen. So,
I do think they might have a very prevalent case of cheese gnomes. But
cheese gnomes.
Cheese gnomes.
You know what, though, we have some of our friends, our chums who are from Wisconsin are talking about their experience, and brandy has come up, but also this is lovely from Bill. Wisconsin and Minnesota magic comes from the waterways and lakes.
And we can tie those back to both of those things. The magic of water is necessary for both of those things to be in a really considerable way.
I think there's a strong Germanic influence too, especially in Minnesota. I felt that strong Germanic influence, and you get kobolds and tieflings. You get things that come, sure, it's cute, but yeah, you definitely get a lot of German myth and influence hitting those areas.
This is bringing something up for me as we are talking about the different states. There have been a couple of places where we're like, well, there's the old magic, and then there's the sort of newer magic, or like there's a little bit of, is it this thing or this other thing? And some of that story, not to make it all about colonialism and everything, but some of it is about what feels more indigenous to the place and what has been imported in with the people who've moved there. And I love that as a sort of like story nugget. It would be also very interesting to pursue.
But also what happened to them, right? Not just the people that came there, but also what happened to them. Because a state does not develop an alcohol problem without actions, right? A community does not develop a problem like that without a reason. Like there's like not a direct causal link, but there's a real narrative there around why a place is the way it is. And that's because of the people what happened to those people and the story they tell about themselves, right?
So I think that's partly cultural too. Like I was just in Germany, and you drink constantly. You drink at every meal. You drink. It's just much more. And I don't drink very much, so it was and it was kind of weird to like always have beer and wine like sort of thrust upon me at all meals. I'm like, okay, calm down. But it's very much more culturally part of the everyday constant experience.
I think that part of it is also America's relationship with alcoholism so innately complicated. Mostly because I think prohibition really warped our relationship with it to an extent. But I also think the other part of it is that like cultural panaceas are really necessary in American culture. And that's a really complicated thing to talk about when you're talking about someone who has like a cultural love and a deep passion. Like when we talk about brandy and we talk about whiskey and we talk about alcohols that have like, they have cultural weight, they have historical practices, they have traditions and relationships to those beverages that go beyond being a cultural panacea, but also are complicated. Like, I just think the magic of that is like, I don't know. I think that that's so, like, I don't mean to like pathologicalize anyone in this context, right? Like, I'm not trying to like pathologize the state of Wisconsin, but I am sort of curious about the nature of our relationship to these kinds of objects. I know that Madam Askew and I have a desperation for caffeine and tea like nobody's business. And that has a cultural impact on the communities that we're a part of.
And the history of caffeine is fascinating. So if you go to the history of coffee, for example, and you put that into the age of exploration and colonization, there you can track that when coffee was brought to Europe and incorporated and coffee houses began to open. I just got to go to one. Total quick segue. I got to go to Florian's in Venice. It's a coffee shop. It's been there since 1720. It is like one of the highlights of my life. Anyway, but you can track the change in industry and productivity and exploration and colonization to coffee being introduced to Europe and driving someone to that, as opposed to drinking ale or liquor all day and basically having a clear head, being more animated and caffeinated. It's so fascinating how the history of caffeine and its effect on the world can be tracked that way. And to the same degree of, I think, alcohol, whether the truth of it or not, you mentioned prohibition, that the temperance movement was fascinating. I get why they were doing what they were doing, because they were trying, there was no regulation. And it was mostly led by women who were trying to get their husbands to stop getting drunk and coming home and beating them. Mm-hmm. So there's a whole vibe there of they were trying to bring alcohol out of society because they saw the harm it was causing them and their daughters and their children every day. So and it's hard not to empathize with that. It's hard not to empathize with temperance and prohibition. But like everything in our society, we go too far and then we have to self-correct. And
I mean, and America is a place of extremes, which is why I think that that's like why I would say that like one of the reasons that like American Gods and other pieces of fiction that are so about the American life, magic is bigger here, not because there's more magic in America, but because there's such a big, there's a big push for change and transformation and shifts. And there's a belief in the possibility of that I think is harder to do when you are staring at a 200-year-old castle that's been untouched by time. And I think that's,
go ahead.
And I think that that's sort of like the fascinating part about America as a magical conduit is that it is a conduit. Like if we consider magic about power and change, then America's relationship to change is one in which change is incredibly tangible, incredibly graspable, and something that everyone is striving for. I have no doubt this is why we're seeing like this is why cultural shifts in America are so powerful and incredibly, like, even if they're not what we want, they like, there's this shifting feeling of the needle. And I'm not saying that no one else does that, but I definitely feel a really powerful shift.
We swing very, and then we
well, I mean,
eventually we calm a little bit.
Natamus, you and I've been talking about sort of like within the younger generation, like under 20, under 25, in the Gen Z, Gen Alpha group of children, we're seeing a big push on like a sort of return to anti-sexuality, where it's like a big push against overt sexuality and overt like a sort of like end the free love movement sort of return. Like we're seeing a backlash on that.
Exactly. It's swung back the other way.
It's a very fascinating thing because I definitely have this sense that like you can feel, I think the thing that makes me feel the most old is recognizing that not only am I on the opposite swing, but I'm on a swing and I don't understand the value of the other side anymore. And I think that that's a very challenging place to be.
I think that's just getting older, to be completely honest. As somebody who's as Gen X, it's very funny. I love all the memes and TikToks about us and stuff where they're like, you know, watching the boomers and the millennials or the boomers and the zoomers and all of them fight. And someone's like invokes Gen X, like, no, leave them alone.
Don't call on the deep magic of Gen X. It's terrifying.
They're asleep. Don't wake them up. Leave them alone. I'm like, yes, we're fine. Just don't bother us.
Leave us in our caves with our dark music and our caffeine.
I think that the best way to keep yourself flexible is to continue to allow for other ideas to exist. That's how we move forward. But I think we can move on to some more. Let's talk about
Grand Arbiter. I'm going to take charge of the conversation for just a moment. But I just want to say, as an aside, before I segue us into more states and nonsense, that I love this portion of our tease where we're like, we're going to talk about this thing, and then we end up getting into, you know, this kind of philosophical conversation about change and how the extremism of the United States is its own sort of magical construct and can kind of, you could do something with that too. You could look at, you know, the sort of magical spirit of a nation and what that looks like. Although I think with the United States, it's so large, it's easier to look at the regions. So, but that said, with our time that we have, what I think might be fun, if there are no suggestions from the comments, maybe pick our favorite states or the place where we live. So, David, is there, you've written about the magic of Oklahoma, and it powers the Adam Binder books, the series. And in that world, you talk about the towers and there's sort of regionalism.
There's also, finish your thought. Sorry.
The regionalism of the magic and the peoples who are there. Is there a state or a region that you haven't written about yet, but that you have sort of some thoughts or opinions about what the magic might look like?
Well, at the end of Deadbeat Druid, Adam has migrated to Denver, where I live now in Colorado. And so we actually get to start moving more into the magic of Colorado. And we've got, so I'm writing more and more about it. And it's funny because Denver is very woo-woo. There's a lot of soft spiritual traditions around me in my friend group. I have everything from kind of soft pagans to Wiccans to people who would label themselves as vaguely spiritual to yogis. People are very into yoga and health. There's just so many different fun vibes of it to kind of tap into and see what I can play with. There are a couple of places I've been and things I've seen, we don't have time to get into tonight, that I don't want to write about. Partly because they've scared me, and I've seen I've seen and experienced things that I'm like, I don't know if I want to bring that in, and I tap into some of that in in the Adam Binder series already. But yeah, and there are things like someone in the chat mentioned, that if there was a lot of magic in America, it's likely native, it's likely indigenous. I will always steer away from that simply because it's not mine and I don't want to appropriate it. When people people say, why do you have elves in America? And I'm like, well, partly because I don't want to appropriate anything. So I'm not using, I don't want to use native tropes or native myth, or because again, white dude. So there are things I would love to go further into. It's funny because I so far I've included everything I want. Like Arizona comes up in Debbie Druid, a little bit of California stuff, but yeah, I'll have to ponder. But right now I'm really into the idea of exploring more about Colorado's vibe.
I mean,
Yeah.
my thoughts on Colorado in my lone experience is that it's definitely like funky at the very minimum.
Depends on where. That's the funny thing about Colorado. So I live in Denver, which is very blue and
I mean, all I can think about is the weird airport. So that's the part that I always think of first, because that's where we spend the most time.
The airport is super weird, and it has all of the myths and urban myths around it, which they make fun of. Like, it's under construction, so there's signs everywhere that say, is it a new food court or a new alien landing area for Area 51? But then you get Boulder. Like, you can go just an hour north to Boulder, out north, kind of northwest of me, and where dogs are people, right? Like, Boulder is extremely wealthy, hippie. And then you can go about an hour south to Colorado Springs, which is incredibly conservative and had like the focus on the family headquarters for so long. They're in Florida now. So you get these very strange extremes very close to me. And within 90 minutes, I can completely change my climate. It's very dry here, but Pueblo, where I do some book events, is high desert. And it's amazing how hot and dry, like it feels like Arizona. And that's only 90 minutes away. So Colorado has these extremes all really tightly close together, and it's really fun to jump between them.
It's interesting because so much of the Southwest is like that, where like Arizona has like 4 biomes, California has like 10 biomes. It's really only certain parts of the United States that are like flat and have only a single biome. But like the reason that the Southwest is so fascinating as a culture and a community is because it's bigger in the Southwest, and it's way wilder.
Yeah, Sally is my friend who lives in the Springs. They're absolutely blue pockets, and there's a very cool little town close to the Springs called Manitou Springs. That if you're ever around that part, go check out Manitou. It's really neat. Yeah, and Colorado Springs has been changing a lot too demographically, just in the last 10-15 years as well.
Oh, I love that depiction of the state, though. And Grand Arbiter, you're right. The Southwest in general has this feature of, the states are so large, the areas that have been carved out are so big that they encompass quite a bit of different types of geography and different vibes. I too have spent a lot of time in the Denver airport, and it is a weird place, but I also love Durango. Speaking of little mining towns and things, and it feels that there is a sort of spirit of tenacity in Colorado, and I'd warrant that might be part of the flavor of the state's magic. Just this willingness to persevere through all of that difference and dramatic landscape. So, Grand Arbiter, what about Washington? You live now in Cascadia in the wilds and wetness.
So here's what I'm going to say. The first thing I'm going to say is that I think I can really only speak about the Seattle King County region, because Washington's not that inconsistent from it's got a lot of the same kind of topography, but the East just has a different vibe to it and a different sense of self. And I do think that even in the last 20 to 30 years, the tech bubble has fundamentally changed the way the city of Seattle feels. There is a kind of isolation, and I think there's a sort of meditative practice. And it is a city of conflicting ideas. I love Seattle to death, but it is a place of like, it's a lot of really like complicated, like it's both in the future and in the past simultaneously. It's trying to occupy these two really different ideals of like trying to celebrate the history while also the history of the native people who are still here, but also like conflicted with this like techno oligarchy, which has just created a really weird social dynamic in the city itself. But I do think there is something to like, I think of it as sort of a magic of networking. It's about a connectivity and a collective kind of magic that you cannot do it alone. And that the reason magic is hard to access in Seattle is because you can't do it alone.
Oh, that's a really good. I love that observation.
Like magic is harder to access because people are really isolated, but when you do access it, it's through your connection to others.
Oh, fascinating.
Look at me having opinions.
I mean, yes, Grand Arbiter. So I know David
also,
had to...
It's like the magic of weirdness, right? It's the magic of like an unknown veil, because there is a deep obsession with like the Sasquatch and like what is out there in the woods, like the reaching out to the unknown.
All of the cryptids.
Is obsessed with weird art and sort of hidden secrets. So like there's all of these like hidden giant troll statues and wood carvings throughout the city. So I think it's a lot of like built magical landmarks and the telling of the secret of those experiences.
So David, we don't mind if your feline is making a noise, by the way.
It's very normal and not weird at all.
He's very loud. When he'll only get louder. He never learned to meow. His name is Whisper, which is to become completely ironic. When he was a kitten, his vocal cords were scarred from kennel cough, so he never learned to meow. His mother never taught him, and his brother, when he was still with us, never taught him. So some years ago, his vocal cords healed, but since he never learned to meow, he only has two settings: silent and scream. So he's 11 pounds of full noise. He's my grumpy old man, so he really doesn't have a volume setting.
I mean, it's let me put it this way. It may be unpleasant for you, but our fans are just glad to know there's a cat in the room.
That's true. And I include myself in that as well. I'm always delighted that there's a cat in the room. But my beloved girl, Fiona, had also gotten to that point where it was quiet or screaming, and there was no in between. So I just wanted to add a moment, that you were talking about Seattle and this sort of like secret places and things. For anyone who wants to read about like magic in Seattle, older book is Wizard of the Pigeons. I think that's by Charles DeLint, an early, might be a different author though, but it's wonderful. It's about like this man who communes with pigeons and is able to like go into like pocket dimensions and different realms and things. It's lovely. So I just want to wrap up my little bit with a visit to Louisiana, which is a state we have not talked about, but I consider it to be a very magical place in the United States. And obviously there are all sorts of magical traditions that happen in Louisiana, but also it, like Oklahoma, is a very creepy place. And there's a lot of like weird swamp magic going on with like Spanish moss and snake charming and things like that. So I think that it's going to be this very organic kind of creepy, dark nonsense. Yes, thank you, Bill. It was Megan Lindholm who wrote Wizard of the Pigeons, not Charles DeLint at all. So thank you for remembering the right author, but it's that early urban fantasy in the 80s. It's so I like so much.
And going back to Louisiana again, Witches Abroad really taps
Ah,
into that vibe so beautifully.
oh my gosh, the bit in the swamps with the swamp witch.
And the witches
So
duel.
good.
When that book has such a one of the
So
things
good.
that I just wrote an article about this that I one of the things I love so much about Terry Pratchett is that he can turn. He always shows you how he could turn it to the dark side, or he could turn it into something else, but then he goes for the funny instead. Like in
So good.
Carpe Jugulum, how the vampires all get corrupted because they Granny tricks them into becoming obsessed with drinking tea.
Yes, it's so good. Ah, no, and I know we're not going to dive all the way into Terry Pratchett because then we'll be here for another 3 hours.
This is the second dip, so I will. This is your second warning.
Oh, thanks.
But
when I'm introducing people to Terry Pratchett, I always say, you look at the sub series within the big series. You don't need to start with the light fantastic. You don't need to be at the very beginning with those early books. You don't have to read them in order. You should pick the set that appeals to you. And the witches are clearly your little series. I love that. The witches were mine for a very long time, and I love Granny Weatheraxe so much. But I'm really obsessed with the Moist Van Lipwig books. Yeah. And what's being called now the industrial age books. And I think that's because I like where Pratchett goes. And one of the things I love about him is that as an author, he was willing to learn and develop his worldview. And you see that happening on the pages of his books. And it's really beautiful.
Well, and we all know that my favorite and most obsessed with is, of course, the death books. So
yeah. Yeah.
Well, and he did so much with gender and talk with the dwarves, and really was butting up against conversations about trans, and he was very much ahead of his time in so many ways. I just wanted to recurse real quick. Tyson a little while back had a recent convo about mysterious stairs appearing and vanishing in the Washington woods, and yes, those little fey portals that come and go that you probably shouldn't wander into.
I mean, some days I'm like, but then I don't have to go back to the salt mine.
Maybe when we're done, doing all the things and we're ready to just sort of retire, that'll be a good time to go through a mysterious portal. But until then, Grand Arbiter, I have too many garments for you to wear, and you're not allowed.
I'm not saying I won't, just so we're clear. Sometimes the door opens only the once. And so sometimes you got to check. But I'll make sure not to eat anything until I'm absolutely sure.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Well, now, David, we are not going to keep you forever, although I would love to do so, because chatting with you about literally anything is such a pleasure. And
Kali Ma. Kali Ma.
I have much more finesse than that. Thank you, Grand Arbiter. Also, that's a lot of gore to drip onto my frocks. I'm just not going to go about it in that way. Thank you very much. I'm going to invite people over for tea and crumpets, and then next thing they know, I've siphoned off some soul. That's just how that works. But
avoid the almond cookies.
Oh, are you allergic to almonds?
No, I'm just thinking of the cyanide.
Oh, yeah, no, absolutely. We wouldn't want we wouldn't want that.
I love almonds. Almond poppy seed is my favorite.
Arsenic. Sorry, it's arsenic that smells like almonds.
But it's still poison. It will still get you. So it's good to avoid. But so this has been such a wonderful chat. And I do want to have you back a million times. So you don't always have to write a book. But if you are writing a book, I'm definitely going to be like, you should come on the show. David, talking about magical systems and going on this adventure with you by region has been so fun and such a delightful conversation. for everyone who is watching and who has not yet read David's books, I hope you have seen a little bit of why I'm obsessed and love them, because David, you have a wonderful, fertile imagination and an incredible way of pulling together these thoughts into marvelous world building and just like really believable magic systems. There was never a point in the Adam Binder series where I was like, oh, that I just don't buy. I was like, yes, of course, this is exactly how that would go.
I think that's the magic of framing magic as practice rather than magic as a solution. And I think that is like partly what makes those kinds of systems work. Is if you make magic a science, it becomes very easy to break your own rules, and you have to like remember all the rules that you've made. And I think magic as practice can be more flexible.
I also feel like magic should stay a little mysterious. There are magic books or fantasy books I've read where the author lays out a perfect system, and you can hear like the D&D dice rolling, or you can hear.
I enjoy those systems. Yeah, I'm not going to lie. I like those systems.
I like them sometimes, but the main thing for me is with mine, I don't want to back myself too far into a corner. And if I lay everything out so precisely with those rules, then I am stuck. At the same time, I have the ability to surprise you, right? As opposed to explore all the different little points on the chart. So I like magic to also have a bit of wonder to it. So if it becomes perfectly formulaic and scientific, then it is just science. And in that case, I think some of the wonder gets taken out. So I like magic to stay, magical.
I think it's about the kind of story you're trying to tell. I mean, I'm a person who absorbs. Madame Askew's job is to read books. Mine is to consume all other forms of media. And I'm a big anime watcher. And as a big part of that is all of the things are very well described and maintained. And partially what makes those things interesting is because when you see rules interact, you can see how A plus B actually equals more than C is always an interesting component. But that's a specific kind of narrative. And it doesn't really play well with narratives about characters with deep emotional challenges. So like if you want characters that are rich and that their magic is an extension of them, it's easier to do that when magic has more personality.
I love that. So, David, when next we meet, we're going to clearly have to talk about Star Trek, because you touched on science versus magic. We'll have to talk about the science magic of Star Trek in the future and plumb the depths of our mutual obsession with Star Trek, as we're all fans. But for now, I just want to remind everyone, go out, pick up David's book, pick up all of David's books. They're all wonderful, but also especially get ready to read Rogue Community College. It's so wonderful. I'm absolutely enchanted. And we want David to continue to write so that I can continue to read more books by David. I want all of you to read them too, but really this is a selfish request. I want the books. David, you are a wonderful writer and a delight. And it's so fantastic to be here with you and to be three queers together, being very gay and jovial, and also managing to live in our gay joy without making it about our coming out stories today. But for everyone who is out there, who is part of our rainbow family, happy National Coming Out Day. And may you find a wonderful, joyful community to be part of. And if that's a community of readers, well, I've got some book suggestions for you. And by the way, did I mention David's books?
Also, they can join the community of our Patreon and our Discord to join us and have a great time discussing more of these topics with your new friends at the Madame Askew Great Arbiter Discord. You can check it out, have a great time, and discuss all these fun things with all these other people.
Yes, thank you, Granddaughter.
Now I've done the salesman bit we can close off.
Yes. Thank you. All right, David, you've got something fun in your hands that you were showing there.
Oh no, I've been playing with a card deck the whole time, and the card that came up right when you mentioned that was community. So I thought it was, speaking of nice magical synchronism.
That's beautiful. Oh, that's perfect. What a beautiful way to end our tea tonight. I never want it to end, but everyone, if you must say goodnight, it's good to do so amongst chums. David, thank you for being our wonderful friend and writing such beautiful books and being part of our tea tonight.
Thank you so much for having me. I had a wonderful time.
Truly, anytime. We'd love to have you back.
She's already plotting. She's like, can we get him next week?
He's going to Comic-Con.
We'll talk later. Everyone, please get your vaccinations already. That's a magic that you really need, is the magic of medical science. Get vaccinated and wear your mask appropriately. Have a great day. And remember
to treasure yourselves as we treasure you, because you are irreplaceable gems in the firmament. And if you do not take good care of yourselves, then I will show you the magic of an enraged cat, because I will haunt you forever and you'll never have a quiet moment again. I'll just knock all your books to the floor. So please take very good care of yourselves. I can scream louder than David's cat, okay? So good night, everyone. Thank you for being here. We'll see you tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. for our Sip the Tea, on the 20th for book club, and for all sorts of future adventures. Grand Arbiter.
bye.
Good night, everyone. Cheers.
Bye.